How's it going? Adam Drake here, and today I want to talk about engine service. Now, being at the RC track all the time and running so much nitro, people ask all the time, how often should I service my engine, send it in to be serviced, bearings changed, piston and sleeve resized, or how often should I take apart my engine to check it out? And that really depends on how you care for your engine, how often you change your air filter, if you use after run oil, and also the conditions that you drive in. So if you drive on tracks that are really, really dusty and you don't change your filter often, you're going to need to send it in for service more frequently. If you live in an area where it's really humid and you don't use after run oil, you're going to need to send it in for service more often. Now, if you take some steps, you can prolong the life of the engine and also prolong kind of the time in between needing to have your engine serviced. So first and foremost would be making sure that you change the filter often, making sure that you use a good quality air filter. I use the Flashpoint pre-oiled filters. They come in packs of 4. They come with a fair bit of excess oil just to make sure that everything is fully saturated. So I'll just take a blue shop towel, kind of squeeze that excess oil out, and I make sure that I change my filters often. ProTech also makes good pre-oiled filters, but you just need to be careful. Make sure that you change it often. Be careful when you're changing the filter. Make sure that it's not windy, especially on in a track where it's really dusty, or if they're blowing off the track and it's really windy. Maybe go in your car, pull the old filter off, put your new filter on, because again, when you have that filter off, it can be exposed to dust that's in the air. So I also like to make sure, like when I'm setting linkage and things like that, I try not to pull my air filter off when I'm at the track to set my linkage. I do the little trick where I zero out the calipers, open the carburetor to the Venturi size. And some will say, maybe that's not the perfect method, but I'm doing that to help make sure that the elements or dust doesn't get inside the engine. Another thing that guys do often is they'll go out on practice days and they'll just basically run until they run out of gas or run out of fuel. And that's horrible on the engine. You're basically running the engine dry. It needs the oil to keep everything lubricated. And even though, yes, there is still some oil coated inside the engine, essentially you're running it out of nitromethane, methanol, and the oil. So you never want to run it out of gas. When you run it out of gas, it's, again, late in the tank. The engine's kind of at its hottest, and you don't want to run the engine dry. So that's really hard on the engine. So I wish there was more of a cut and dry or clear number of gallons that at this mark you should send your engine in to have bearings put in, or to have it resized, or to have it inspected. But at the end of the day, if your engine's running well and you do some of these things, like change the filter often, don't run it out of gas, use after run oil, keep running the engine until you have a problem. Now, if you live back east and it's like the end of the season and you want to make sure your engine's properly stored and you already ran a whole season on the engine, it's not a bad idea to send it in, have us look it over, possibly change the bearings, resize it, maybe put in a fresh rod just to be safe. But in most conditions, I would say keep running it. Run the engine until you start to, it maybe gets a little finicky with the tune, or you start to have some small problems with consistency. I don't recommend taking apart the engine just to so-called inspect it, because there's really not much more that you can see by opening it up than what you can already tell from the outside. So if there's no leaking from the front bearing, most likely the front bearing's good. If there's no noise or kind of chattering sound from the engine, the rear bearing is most likely pretty good. If when you go to roll the engine over, you don't feel slop at top dead center, most likely the rod's still in good shape. If the engine can hold itself up, it still has good seal and compression, it should still run good. Now, there are times when I'll do the check of the engine, see if it holds itself up, and it'll fall over. Now, I don't really worry about that as long as the engine's still running good. It does mean that it is getting low on compression and seal, but if it's still running good, I don't really worry about it. That's more of a check for if it starts to get a little finicky and you have some problems. That's just one of the checks you can do, is to see if it will hold itself up. But other than that, just make sure you kind of keep everything clean. You use a good fuel. I use the Flashpoint 30% race blend fuel. It burns really clean. It's a full synthetic blend, and performance, power, runtime, everything with that fuel is really good. And it also allows me to get a lot of life, or a lot of gallons, out of my engine. So hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully this will allow you to also have engines that last a long time and have really good performance.